The most engaging, impactful, informative, and entertaining talk show ever. Get ready to hear the voices of many local, state, and national artists, musicians, comedians, pastors, athletes, and politicians. It's time for South Florida Live with Jeffrey Brown. The most engaging, impactful, informative, and entertaining talk show ever. Get ready to hear the voices of many local, state, and national artists, musicians, comedians, pastors, athletes, and politicians. It's time for South Florida Live with Jeffrey Brown.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the South Florida Live podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Brown, and welcome to the podcast. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Listen, come on in. Let's get it started. Once again, happy Black History Month to everyone. Happy Black History Month. I know we shouldn't be just bound in a month, but it should be a yearly celebration. So we're thinking about, we're going to push that all year, but happy Black History Month to everyone. So it's all fitting that we'll start it off with the anthem. So while you guys are coming in, come on in, Facebook, YouTube, let's go. Those that are that's coming on, go ahead and let me know that you're there. Say good evening to us and let us know that you that you're with us and everything is going well. You can see well, the signal is great, the sound is great. Come on in. Facebook, let's do it. Come on in. Let's go, guys. Facebook, YouTube, Facebook. Let's go. Hey, listen. If you're on Facebook, this is what I need you to do for me. Please, on this evening, go ahead and like and share. Go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and share this broadcast with someone, this episode with someone. And why don't you just tag a few people and let them know that we're live and we're on and we're having a conversation. We are navigating through the process of grieving and understanding the signs of depression. Someone needed. We've been getting so many comments and so from people inboxing me, telling me how powerful last week was and the weeks before, and it's really helping to break some things, some change on some people, break some barriers, and release some folks some from the conversation that we're having. So go ahead and reach out to someone, because I'm sure someone can use this, what we're talking about on this evening. YouTube, let's go. YouTube, help me out. YouTube, let's go ahead and like and share. If it's your first time viewing us by YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. After you do that, hit notification. After you do that, hit all, click on all. That way you'll be notified every time we go live on this podcast. So let's do that for me. Let's do that for me, please. Thank you. Lift every voice and sing. This is in honor of Black History Month. As you see, I'm wearing my Dr. Lewis shirt, John Lewis, representing Black history. He's done a lot. We have to acknowledge that, even though I'm going to save that for Wednesday. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. All right, I'm gonna give you one more minute. Let's go Facebook. Let's go YouTube. Let's go, guys. Let's go. Help me out. Make some comments. Let me know you're there. Say good evening to us. Say good evening to us. I want to say good evening to everyone that's tuning in, that everyone that's coming on. Good evening to you. Hope everyone experienced peace and blessings on today. Even if you were at work or at home or whatever you were doing. Hope it was a joyful, marvelous day. And you made it safely home and you made it through this day. To God be the glory on that. All right, 30 seconds, because we're not going to hold it. I want to give my guest all the time that he needs on tonight, because we don't want to hold him on tonight. I know he's busy, so we want to go ahead and get into it. That way he can have all the time that he needs on tonight, that we're going to talk about some things on tonight. Hopefully it'll bless you and help you, and someone will be better afterwards. All right. Hey, listen, thank you for those that are tuning in. Thank you for those that are coming in. Come on in. Make sure you share this broadcast, this episode with someone on this evening. Please share, do that for me. Share or text someone. You know, we are text savvy now. So go ahead and text someone, let them know that the South Florida Live podcast is on, and we are talking about grieving on this evening, and also understanding the signs and the symptoms of depression. We want to help someone out that may be going through that challenge. I got the doctor in the house tonight, that's gonna speak, that's gonna clear up some things for us tonight. So we're not gonna prolong this time. We're gonna get started. We're gonna go ahead and get this party started with the doctor. He's in the house, y'all. Yes, he is. My friend, my brother, Dr. J.R. Thicklin. Hey, man, good evening. Welcome to the South Florida Live podcast. Once again, it's my honor to have you, man. I'm honored that you have accepted the invitation to be a part of this episode on this evening. Thank you so much. How are you doing this evening?
Well, good evening, my brother. It is extremely my pleasure to be on with you this evening. I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited about what's happening. I'm excited about just what you're doing here with this broadcast. This has been absolutely incredible. As you alluded to, I too have received many calls, many texts, many comments about last week's show. And the interesting thing is that it liberated a lot of people to hear a dialogue, a conversation about a subject that oftentimes we shun, we don't want to deal with, we rather not face. And last week, you made it very palatable. You made it something that people could talk about. And there was a lot of people liberated as a result thereof. So, I'm excited about tonight. I'm excited about going into it a little deeper. And good evening to each and every one. And those that are viewing on the pages there, please like and share it with someone else. And definitely we invite your comments and invite your, your questions, even in our time together tonight.
Yes, sir. I see Dr. Ross is joined us this evening. God bless you, my
Absolutely.
sister. God bless you.
Yes.
Yeah, man. I was getting the phone even after the show. I was getting text messages and phone calls. How powerful it was, how it lifted them and lifted those that were reaching out to me and helped them. And that's what we want to do. That's what it's about. Because, like I always say, I know if I'm going through some of these things, I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I'm the type person, if I can help somebody get through it like I did, that's what I want to do. I think that's just my, if you want to say ministry or gift or my calling or
Absolutely.
whatever. Um, that's something that I want to do, and I'm gonna continue to do it, regardless of
Absolutely.
if anyone touched or not. I'm going to continue to do it because it only take one. It
It
only
only
take
takes one.
one. Yes, sir.
You
Only
know,
take
you,
one.
you said something that's so important that you're going to continue to do it. Even right now, as we start, we have to realize that as we speak in the present moment, there are people that are, if you would, there are people right now that are commemorating someone who just passed or they just buried. You know, somebody's going through their first year, second year. I see my dear friend Cindy Rice, who's on, and I remember just 2 years ago now. Wow, you know, she's celebrating the second anniversary of her husband's
Right.
passing and his funeral. And right now, we hope that this really, really serves as a healing to you. Incredible man. He was in life, and you know, and they were a team. And you talk
Right.
about that when we start talking about separation. We start talking
Mhm.
about dealing with that. Those aren't easy things to deal with, and no one should be pressured to make it feel like that it's something easy that they just can go through. It is something that is oftentimes delicate. Sometimes it's a longer term process. It is not a linear process. It's not like, well, I go through this stage, I go through this stage, I go through this
Right.
stage, then I'm good. I'm good from that point on.
Mhm.
You're going to have times when you're good and sometimes that when you're not so good. And the only thing that does, we've heard the old adage that time heals all wounds.
Mhm.
That's both true and not true. Yeah,
Right.
in time we learn to be more tolerable of it. In time we learn to manage it a little better. But there's many things that can happen. The anniversary of it. Sometimes just seeing something that reminds you of that person can either be a trigger or it
Wow.
can be something that we
Wow.
decide that we're going to embrace. So, you know,
Wow.
that's the thing about it. Having that liberty to understand whatever you need to do to get through this process, you give yourself permission to do so. And
Right.
you don't have to look for somebody else's, if you would, permission for you to grieve.
Right.
Your way of grieving. It could be the fact that you have pictures around you. You have
Right.
things around you to remind you, whatever way that it takes for you to get through it, work your way through it and give yourself permission to do so.
Right. I'm so glad that you brought that up about, something, anything can just trigger the and take you back to it. I just experienced that a couple of weeks ago at my cousin's funeral. My cousin Shirley's funeral. Her son Gerald. We're like brothers, and just being there. It was a couple of things that triggered got took me back to my mom and took me back to some other things. Was that she was such a beautiful person, beautiful life, just a beautiful woman. And she reminds me of my grandmother. And for her to remind me of my grandmother, that means she reminds me of my mother. So
Absolutely.
so we were, Dylan, that brought me back. And that Saturday sitting there at the funeral, I literally just was visualizing and seeing my mom again. So that kind of took me back. And then the other thing is that kicked me to the area that pushed me into the state of depression that I was in at one time. Was
Mhm.
just thinking about, I had lost both my parents, and that's what
Yeah.
pushed me. I was in a place where I had never been before, and my cousin now was also in that place where he'd never been before, being that he had lost his father some years ago and now his mother. So now I'm saying, God, we're in the same, he's going to experience this same place that I experienced. So I was thankful that I didn't try and hold it or cover it and just embrace it and not let it out, because I'm like, oh my God, if I start talking to him about it, then it's gonna bring it back to me. But that was the purpose of me going through it.
Absolutely.
To
You
be
said
able to
something
speak
that's
to
so
someone.
important. We need to understand that in what you just said, because oftentimes, and you and I can both relate to this, and I call it the fraternity sometimes. And I told the story last week about, having lost back to back. I went through a Job experience, losing family members back to back to back.
Right.
And I will never forget in 2013 when my oldest sister passed away unexpectedly, and her youngest son, he really went through the grieving process, and it hurt him. He was young. I think he was 20, 21 years old when it happened. And I will never forget, almost every day he would be posting things on Facebook. He would be talking about how much he missed his mom. He would have pictures of her. And for some, it was like over excessive. And even to a certain degree, I'm like saying, I might need to talk to him because this is him, posting every day. But he was working his way through it. And who would think that was on February 28th?
Wow.
July 5th, my mother passed just a few months later. And there we are when I'm at the hospital. And when my nephew came and we were in the solarium, I put my arms around him and I said to him, we're now both part of the same fraternity.
Right.
And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? We both have lost our mothers. And inside of doing that, it was a bond that was created in a certain way. And I've found out now, even now, my mother has been gone now. This year here will be 11 years. And I think about it, I'm looking at friends and classmates and different ones who are now experiencing now the loss of parents and the loss of loved ones now, and they're grieving. But like you said, it is now my experience having gone through that I'm able to share and able to share with them and be able to embrace them in a way and walk them through it, because of the fact they're now encountering something that you've gone through. So your grieving and what you go through is never in vain, and you never go through anything just for yourself. It's always going to be something to benefit someone else.
Right. I found that out that weekend. So I was so thankful that I could be there for him at the time. And I mean, in spite of, he's still having his time, because Monday was a reality check after everything was over, because they did the burial on Monday. So it was really a reality check. And I told him it would be a reality check on Monday. It would really hit you Monday and the week and days after that. And, just being able to share with him and try and help him get through it. And I said, you know what, Lord, you do all things well, and there's a purpose and there's a reason why you allow us to go through things. And it's for us to be able to speak and help others through it also. And that's if I say anything to anyone, whatever it is that you may be going through, whatever you've gone through, whatever trial you have gone through, trust me, someone else is going to go through it that's in your circle. So don't hold it. This is one that you have to tell, you have to share, because there's others that are looking for that release as well. So that being said, let's talk about it. Let's talk about, I'm glad we went there, because this is my first question. Can a unhealthy, because if I didn't get the help that I needed, I would have been grieving unhealthy. So can an unhealthy grieving push you to depression? Can an unhealthy grieving unhealthy, could that push you to depression, to the state of depression?
Well, that's a real good question, because I would frame it this way, that sometimes you enter a state of depression because of unhealthy grieving. Mm-hmm. In other words, when we start talking about unhealthy grieving is when you start actually feeling, when you totally isolate yourself inside of depression. You don't want to be around anyone at all. You may start drinking or doing things excessively, and you may feel yourself being even destructive. And as a result of that, what happens there is that you will find yourself sinking into a greater depression. Sometimes depression doesn't always show up in the form of mourning, not mourning, should I say, in the sense of sadness. Sometimes depression will show up in the sense of drinking or doing something excessive. Sometimes depression will even show up in the form of anger. And so when we talk about showing up in the form of anger, we find out sometimes people can be angry with the person that's lost, the person who have passed on. Sometimes they can be angry with themselves. Self-guilt can bring you into depression. So when we talk about, you know, grieving has its different stages. Grieving, depression has its different types. And so unhealthy grieving, once again, is a thin line because we will grieve in different ways. But when grieving becomes destructive to yourself, destructive to your thinking, destructive to other people, then that's when it's unhealthy. And it can lead to depression. And depression takes on so many different forms. And I see there to talk about how the trauma of grieving is different when someone is killed by someone versus someone who is ill or naturally end of life. And that is something that we definitely was going to get to, because although there's a loss in every case, there's a different level of grieving, because there's a sense of injustice when someone has been killed. There's a sense of injustice. It's a sense of a thief, that someone took something from you. Someone took the person out of the world. And even more so, we kind of hit it on it last week, that what happens when you see people grieving and over someone who has been killed or things that have happened, and there's never been any closure, meaning the person was never held accountable for it. They never arrested anyone for it, or someone simply got off for it. That's even another deeper level of grieving there, because now it's not only the grieving of the loss in the sudden loss, but it's also grieving of the injustice that has happened. And so now you feel violated. You feel that someone stole something from you. And that trauma there is sometimes takes a harder time to get through. You know, that's the type there that you might really need some therapy. You need some therapy and some counseling. And I might shock most of the church people. You're going to need something healing beyond a word of prayer right there. You're going to need someone to walk with you. Once again, blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. But we never ask the question, who is the they that should be comforted? And the comforting ought to be those resources and those supportive individuals around you. Therapy is very, very helpful. And we're now talking a whole lot more about, grief therapy, grief counseling, because we need it. And I've seen it, and you can attest to this. I've seen when leaders of a church pass, and what we don't understand, in many cases, that whole church they need counseling, they need group therapy, they need group grief therapy, because they've all experienced a loss of a figure or a person who held a position, a special influence in their life. And so we have to get through it. We don't show how spiritual we are by not grieving. It is not it's not a sign of strength, but because we've been told things like be strong for everyone, and we think being strong is not crying. We think being strong is not grieving. That is a misnomer. The matter of fact that you're supposed to grieve. Matter of fact that your tears have tear ducts, and when we cry, it releases. There's a release that comes from it, and so especially with men, we have to talk to men. We got to learn to grieve and be able to grieve and not be bound by this misinformed masculinity of how strong we are because we don't grieve.
Yeah, because I found out, and you can correct me on this. I found out those that had held on to grief, did not go through the proper grieving process, and they grieving became unhealthy. They end up becoming unhealthy, whereas it pushed them into some health challenges, to the point to stroke, heart attacks, because they held and they held it in, didn't want to talk. I'm good. Hey man, how you doing, man? How you feeling? How you holding up? Oh, I'm good. I'm pressed. I'm good. No, you're not. A lot of times we're not good, and talking is, and most of the time, you said it, us men sometimes have that issue of that macho thing, trying to be. Now, sisters going to find them a group.
Yeah.
And it's going to come, they're going to have about 4 or 5 that's going to come together, and they're going to talk that thing out. But for some reason, and if you want to touch on it, Doc, for some reason, the brothers like to hold it in. How can we change that mentality And what can we say to the brothers that's watching tonight that may be going through some grieving process, that's maybe dealing with grieving, and they push themselves into depression and they don't want to deal with it and they don't want the reality? What is it that we can point? What direction can you point them to, and what can you say to them to get them to understand how important it is?
I'm glad you asked that, because what that brings us to is a three-part definition. One that is both physiological, one that is emotional, and one that is, even if you would, a spiritual. And so let's go back to this. When we start talking about grieving is grieving a loss of something. It doesn't even have to mean death. It could be a loss of a relationship. It could be a loss of a job. It could be a loss of a companion. It could be a loss of a pet. But let me bring it to this level here. Their old society socialization that we as men have been told, like we've been saying it for years, generation. We say what? Real men don't cry. Well, if we buy into that, then guess what? We feel like we shouldn't cry. We should be strong, because we now see crying as a weakness, as some form of weakness. In reality, it's not a form of weakness. So let me give you the physiological definition of the way I like to use it is this. Anything that a man was not supposed to be able to do or do not have, he wasn't given. There's a reason why men don't bear babies. We don't have ovaries. We wasn't given the ovaries to have children. We wasn't given that to do so. So therefore, we don't have babies. We don't have ovaries. We don't have those things. We don't have a uterus and all those things, because we wasn't designed to have it. But isn't it interesting that we all were given tear ducts and tear glands? Those tear ducts and tear glands was put there inside of us as our makeup for the same reason that it was given to women, because your tears is a natural release. It is a stressor. One of the first scriptures we learned as little children, it's the shortest scripture in the Bible. It says what? Jesus wept. What do you mean he wept? He cried. He cried about his friend Lazarus having died. So we know that crying is a part, grieving is a part. So what we have to say to brothers is this: you're not exemplifying strength. You're not exemplifying being manly because you don't cry, you don't grieve. What you're doing is that you're denying yourself the ability to feel. You're denying yourself the ability to face the reality of what you're going through. And that will lead to health problems. That will lead a lot of time to pent up anger. That will lead to pent up depression. That will lead to the fact that you will start striking out at everybody. And if you really watch your life, you will be grieving, but you will be depressed inside of it. One of those signs of depression that you may start being very cluttering. You may start thinking you don't care about nothing. Everything is so cluttered around you. Disorganization, those things that are happening with you. You may find yourself slipping into drinking. You may find yourself, just with bad habits and just constantly declining. And all that has happened because you have refused to allow yourself to healthily grieve. Cry. It's all right to cry. One of the things that we have to do with our brothers, man, we have to be very transparent. We have to be very transparent inside of when we have conversation. We have to be able to tell each other the truth and know it's all right. Because when we tell someone the truth, here's the thing. When we want to help someone, if we want to help that person, we tell them the truth, what they need to hear. Right. If we only want to help ourselves, we tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
And that's something to really think about it. Telling the truth will help them.
Right.
Tell them what they need to hear. However, if we want to help only ourselves, meaning to join in the avoidance of the circumstances, situation, then we'll tell them what they want to hear. And so we have to be real about that.
I often say being my friend is not easy because
I love it.
I'm small, but to be my friend is not easy, because one thing I will do, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be straightforward. If you ask me, I'm going to tell you. Now, don't ask me if you don't want to know. If you really want to know the real answer, if I got it, I'm going to tell you that, no, you wrong. You did X, Y, Z. And if I hurt your feelings, okay. But if you want me to be honest with, like I always tell you want me to tell you the truth, or you want me to lie to you?
Exactly.
a real friend is not going to lie. A real friend is going to tell the truth. I like that you brought that up, because a friend must show himself friendly.
Exactly.
So if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna be a true friend. I'm just that friend. That's why I say I'm not easy to be a friend. So now this question is for our friends and family, our loved ones that's out there. How can those family and friends know the signs of depression of those grieving unhealthy, and what are some of the signs that they need to watch out for or be aware? I know you mentioned drinking in that area, just acting what's some of the signs that they need to pay more attention to?
Well, let's put it in this way. There are many different signs. But when we look at depression falls into different categories in different stages. And I want to make sure I clarify that, because guess
Yes.
what? Each of us could deal with depression in a different way. We could be depressed by the fact of some bad news that we got. That depression may only last a small period of time and we may get over it. But depression could manifest itself in various ways and various forms. I'm going to give you a few signs and symptoms. It's because there are different types of depression that happen. We have what we call major depression disorder. Now, what does that look like? Major depression disorder is persistent sadness. It's a loss of interest and pleasure in activities. It's changes in your appetite or your weight or your sleep disturbances, being fatigued, feelings of worthlessness or feeling guilty, having difficulty concentrating, thoughts of death or suicide. That is major depressive disorder, and we find those things there, and that's what it is. And what happens? What are some of the signs? They start withdrawing. They withdraw from social activities. They have decreased productivity. We see all those things happen inside of this. Not only that, their irritability. They start exhibiting physical symptoms such as headaches and digestive issues and impaired ability to function in daily life. So in other words, they start struggling just getting through the normal things in daily life. That is part of major signs of major depressive disorder. And then what we look at it here is that even with major depressive disorder, it can go from different stages. It can go from a mild form to a severe form. And when we look at that, from mild to severe, with symptoms lasting for at least 2 weeks or longer. So that's when you start notice that I'm noticing this is persistent, because we have to be very cognizant, especially when we have friends or loved ones and family, and you just experience loss. And like I said, not just death, but when there's a loss there, you want to keep your eyes on them. You want to observe what are the things that you see that are out of their norm. You start seeing them withdraw and being away. They're no longer socially active at all. And they see those changes in pattern. That's one of the major things when we talk about major depressive disorder. But then it goes into many other things like persistent depressive disorder. Once again, very similar to the major depressive disorder, this is what we see. We see the fact of not only do we see signs of chronic feeling of sadness, hopelessness, low self-esteem. We see those things that happen, and it's interspersed with milder symptoms. We start feeling chronic feelings of sadness, just sad all the time, to the point that it's being expressed outwardly. It's being expressed through the things they do, experiencing joy or pleasure in a sense of being trapped in one's own consciousness. So all of those things we start watching, we start observing when people go through these type things. And the main thing that we have to understand is that when people are going through those type things, they need your help, not your criticism.
Right.
They need your support, not your criticism.
Right.
That's when they need your support the most. And those are signs of depression there. And then the last one I want to talk about, not that it's not more, is that we start seeing, if you would, bipolar disorder. Now, oftentimes when we hear bipolar disorder,
talk on that one, brother. Talk on that for a little minute. Talk on that for a while.
We just start saying, well, they got two different personalities. It's beyond that. We used to use the word, we used to call it manic depressive. As a matter of fact, that's what the name was. The old name that we used to use, that was used clinically, was called being manic depressive. And so when we talk about that illness, it's an episode of depression that's alternating with periods of mania or hypomania. And during the depressive episode, we're seeing the different things play out. elevated mood, increased energy, then racing thought. So we see the different things that are happening with that individual. And so we have to look at those things there and look at them for what they are. And then sometimes depends on, once again, how a person may have died, how that person may have left here, the situation around it. People can deal with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that can manifest itself inside of depression as well. So we have to look at those things and understand that all those things are things that hurt. There's depression there. And like I said, there are many more stages. We have, even with women, think about when women could have a baby and the baby could live and they could still go through what we call postpartum depression. Postpartum depression, oftentimes having delivered a baby and now this sense of not even feeling worthy. I've done this, but I don't feel like I have any value of any life. So there are so many different stages and so many different types of depression, and people can experience a mild form or a severe. Our main thing is that when we begin to look at the symptoms and the signs that are there, we need to be cognizant to realize there's been a change. This is not their norm. This is not the way they are. Or we're seeing this last for a long period of time. And so how do I talk to them? You bring up the thing, are you okay? Now, in most cases, they're going to say, yes, they are. Mm-hmm. But in your system there said, listen, I just noticed that, that you're not your normal self, in what way can I help you? Offer to help. Sometimes people need help. Right. People need help. And sometimes, watch this, they won't help and need help, but they're afraid to walk through it alone. And this is where your friendship or your ties are challenged, because sometimes you may have to hold their hand and walk through it with them. Exactly. Do not buy into that. Well, they got to go through it by themselves. No, they don't. No, they don't. Walk with them through it. And the reason why this is important, the reason why this is so important is because what do we see oftentimes happen with families when there is a death? Mm-hmm. We see World War III break out. We see division. We see hurt. And oftentimes that hurt and things that we're seeing manifested, brother, these are still signs and symptoms. A lot of times these are things that have been pent up anger, things that was just simply never expressed before, things that they've been feeling. The worst comes out in people, and it takes sometimes years, if ever, for people to reconcile. But I always say somebody's got to have some sense.
Somebody's got
to have some sense.
Right. Somebody got to have some sense. Somebody got to bring
to break that ice. Somebody's got to be willing to try to be that repairer of the breach, if you would.
Wow. Yeah. Somebody got to bring some order and some understanding to the whole situation. There got to be at least one or two that can come together and fix it. Listen, y'all, I told you this is going to be real powerful. I hope this is helping someone out there. I see the comments, and someone said something about stress. They say stress can kill. That is so serious. That is so for real. Because that's build up stress. That's stuff you're holding on to. And I think I said it earlier, if you don't release it, if you holding on to it, it'll kill you. It'll take you into a major heart attack or a stroke if you don't be careful of that. That's why I asked that question about the unhealthy grieving, because I know there's some people that's out there now that's grieving unhealthy. That's grieving unhealthy.
They are.
I know
they are. They're living through it. And here's the crazy thing about it. Some of you, we work with them. Some of them, we're around them. You ever think about a person who's on your job or whatever? You could work in a school, in an office, or wherever you may work. And the person have lost, they suffered a loss. And, you may see them gone for a few days or a week, and they're back at their desk, back into the thing. It doesn't mean that they're okay. They may be back because they don't have a few sick days, a few days to grieve because of the company. They may be back because of the fact they're afraid to be by themselves. And so this is a time when you are sensitive enough, knowing how to be there, offering it, what can I do to help? Doing little things to just show love and just show some support can go a very long way. Here's the thing I tell people not to do. Don't avoid them. Don't avoid them like they've got the plague. Don't avoid them as if somehow or another, and sometimes people do it innocently because they just don't know what to say or what to do. And we talked about last week, being there for someone who is grieving is not about the words that you say necessarily, because sometimes it's not the power of words, it's the power of presence. It's the power of presence. So if we're present there for them, if we're present there, your presence will speak greater than your word. Your vocabulary may be exhausted, and there are times when you don't know what to say. And I said last week, don't come up with little corny things. Sometimes a lot of things we say even in church is so corny, and it's not very helpful. And so sometimes, and it's very important. So I see here a question. I thought I saw it. How do you help someone who feels that professional psychologists, therapists are in need of psychiatric help? Okay, that's real good. Okay. So here's the thing about it. I always say even a therapist needs a therapist.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Because a person may hold a position or profession doesn't mean, I put it to you like Paul said it, I count not myself to have apprehended. It doesn't mean that they have it all together themselves. They may have it together enough to be able to minister to it, but we have to, we have to understand the fact we can't get caught up in their situation unless their situation is directly impacting us. Because sometimes we can see someone who said, man, they in bad shape themselves. How can they help me? Well, you may be surprised they are helping a lot of people, but yet it's still they're needing help themselves. Sometimes people are leading while bleeding themselves.
Wow. That say that.
Yeah.
Say that one again.
Oftentimes
somebody missed that.
They're leading while bleeding themselves. And I'll say this to you. We'll see that a lot with your leaders, pastors, and different ones. That's why sometimes you see them go off the deep end because they themselves have not cried out for help, or they have not sought help themselves to find what they need. That's the reason why the scripture says there is safety in a multitude of counsel. But when we allow our pride, and you may not believe this is pride, but pride and embarrassment and shame are really in the same boat. And so when we allow our pride to make us feel like we can't go to anyone because we don't want anyone to know that we have a need or that we need some help, then what we do is that we suffer in silence. And that suffering will catch up with us in the form of health issues, strokes. We see it happen. Hearts start racing. People dying and falling dead in a pulpit. And so these things are happening because of the fact they're not getting the help they are. Sometimes they're walking in denial. I say to you this, there is no need to prove to anybody that you are the woman of steel or the man of steel, especially when it comes to your emotional, your psychological health, because those things will affect your physical health. Over a period of time, let me say something. You try to figure out why I got clogged arteries. It is not just because of what you've eaten. It's because of the things that you've allowed to weigh inside, things that have gone unaddressed. And I want to say two things here that's important. And we talk about this a lot, even when we deal with things like even anger and anger management. There are two things that we deal with. Either you address it or you will be affected by it. And so what do I mean by that is this, is that you could have things happening in your life that you never address, but you're angry and all it's doing, and it's piling up and it's piling up. And then you could have an event that may not even be big, and all of a sudden you explode. You explode, you go off on everybody, you become reckless. That's a person exploding. But by the same token, we have people who very silently carry things. They've carried it, they've never released it, they've never got it addressed. And what happens to them is that not that they explode, but they implode. And they crumble from within. And we've seen that when we looked at what happened with 9/11, those towers imploded. If you notice, they crumble from within. And that's what I'm saying. If we don't get the help and the support we need, we can crumble from within. Right. You can snap, crackle, and pop.
Yes, sir. Listen, Miss Rice, you said something. You all in my stuff, Miss Rice. You said something. She said something that we talked about it, I think the other week, that sometimes people say some of the dumbest things. And she hit us with it, where sometimes people be like, telling you don't tell, like she said, don't tell someone who is grieving that their loved one wouldn't want them to cry over them. How dumb can you be? I mean, I'm sorry.
That has no merit. Absolutely has no merit.
That's just out of order. And I mean, how do you know? And that's my thing. I just have an issue when people say, "Oh, well, would they, would they want you to be crying, or going through this?" How would you know? You don't know. That is not the right thing to say to someone,
Yeah.
because now you push them into a mindset that, you know what? Maybe I don't need to cry. Maybe I don't need to grieve. Let me stop doing this. And they end up, I feel they end up, that's when they start holding stuff in because someone made a statement like that and caused them to change their mind and caused them to see it in another light that they see. And that is so selfish of people to say stuff like that.
I was at I think it was a reunion concert here last year, and it may have been there or some other place. And I remember hearing, I believe it was David Mann talking about Tamara. Maybe it was an interview he was doing. And I've heard other people say that, and they said this. They had conversation with their spouses, and they said, "Listen, I pray that, in other words, I pray that I go first, because I don't think I could deal with you leaving me first. I don't know if I could live. I don't know if I can function and get through without you." And what are they saying? They're saying, I actually anticipate that it would be so hard to bear that I don't even want to be around to go through it.
I wouldn't make
And so when we say that a person wouldn't want you to cry and all that, it's a misled statement.
So insensitive.
Because the person wants you to live your life, sure. Right. But the person can't tell you how to live your life. You have to be able to navigate through this loss. You have to be able to navigate with this person, because there's an empty spot that is left. There's an empty seat at the table. There's an empty space in the bed. There's an empty place in the car. And so there's a lot that has been lost there. And so we have to understand something, is that when we deal with this, it's all right to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's all right to ask for help. Okay. And that's the one thing that I'm saying. Don't allow pride to stop us from asking for help. But on another note, let me say this to everyone that's listening. It also says something to us when we understand our twofold purpose in this earth. We are called to be a friend to somebody. We're called to be a light to someone. You have to ask yourself the question, am I in a good mindset to be a friend? Am I in a good mind space to be a friend? I don't want to be on the side of the criticism. I want to be on the side of the comfort. Be on the side of the comfort. How can I comfort them? Comfort them that mourn. How can I be there for them? Sometimes it's a matter of, can I help you do this? I saw a person paid for a friend of theirs. They paid for house cleaning for them for 3 months. 3 months. They didn't want her to worry about anything, cleaning up and nothing like that. Made sure they saw about them, and even offered to get her out of the house sometime. Anything that would help relieve that. In the end, the friend said to her, "I thank you so much. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." What was she saying? She said, "Listen, I might not even know what I needed right then, but thank you for being forward thinking enough to be considered enough." And that's those things that we have to consider.
Right. I'm going to say this, and then we're going to move on to the next question, because sometimes you just got to be, and I told you it's hard. It's hard to be my friend. Sometimes I've learned over the years, and I'm learning, I've heard it before, I'm learning. There's sometimes when people come to you with some things and people try and share stuff with you, or they try and speak to you, you have to have you have to have the power to overcome that. You have to have the mindset where, and I know you're going through your grieving, where I got 4 words. I don't know if y'all want to catch these 4 words. Y'all might want to write these 4 words down. I got 4 words for people who come to me with stuff that don't make sense. I have 4 words for them. Y'all want to know what the 4 words are? The 4 words that I have for those are, I don't receive that. Whatever they come with some crazy stuff, you got to tell them, I appreciate that, but I don't receive that. I'm not dealing with it. I'm not going with it. I'm not gonna accept that, what you just said to me, because that's not helpful, and it's gonna shift me somewhere where I don't want to go. And when I go there, this is the thing, y'all. I'm sorry. This is the thing. A lot of time, once people say stuff and it shifts us into the place where we're not supposed to be, then they're nowhere. They're really not there then to help you get out of where you are and where you are and where you went to and where your mind is at in that state of depression, going through that. Now you're dealing with mental health and all that because someone have said something to you that did not make sense and you end up receiving it. So I just tell you like this, I don't receive it. That's it. Okay, we moving on. I just that was just in me. I had to put that out there because a lot of times people do.
I think that's a great admonishment that sometimes you have to get people to understand you don't have to receive everything that come at you. And sometimes you talk about a shield of faith. Sometimes you have to have your shield to deflect that type of type of comments that are not well there. I was looking at someone talked about the fact of they've heard some very insensitive statements said to them, even in their present season of grieving. Now, two things. Sometimes people do it out of ignorance. They do it out of ignorance. They do. So sometimes people, they think they're helping, and sometimes people are trying to be all profound. Like I said, humble yourself. It not be the moment to be profound. It may just simply be the moment to be present. And I cannot say that enough. One thing I talk to is that the difference oftentimes between a chaplain in a pastor, a priest, is that the chaplain knows that they show up and they shut up.
Right.
They show up and they shut up. That's what they show up and they shut up.
Trying to give a word and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's not always the time. A lot of time it's the power of presence. Now, surely there may be a time in which you may join hands and you may pray for a family. But let me say something. There are a lot of things that we, particularly as people of color, we have lost in our culture, even from the motherland. There are certain tribes over in Africa. There are certain parts of Africa that this is what happens when there's a grief, when there's a loss, and even when there's a sickness at time. The villagers around them or friends will come all the way, and they will come and spend time with those that are going through. Sometimes it could be 3 days, it could be a week, or whatever. Oftentimes they're there and just present. They're there and they fellowship. And there's a name, I can't pronounce it now. I'm better at doing Greek than I am. But what happens when they get ready to leave, they then leave, and there's a phrase that means we come, we've heard, and we're with you. In other words, though I'm leaving, we're with you. We're always with you. And that is their way of supporting that. It's that presence there. And we have to learn that it's power in presence, more power in presence than it is the amount of words that a person may say.
Right. Listen, wow. It's moving. But wow. Can we I want to go here because I've been getting a lot of inboxes from some couples and married folks, and someone have dealt with this, and so they wanted me to present this to you. So we're gonna shift a little bit, y'all, and we're gonna deal with depression in the couples arena. So, other words, can depression affect marriage and relationships? And if so, what are the effects? If you got one, I guess that's from what I'm getting, you got one that's dealing with it, and guess they didn't want to get the help they needed. So can depression affect marriage and a relationship?
Absolutely. Depression can affect marriage and relationship like it.
And what are the effects?
Well, the effects varies. I mean, depression could lead to lack of activity, lack of intimacy, lack of sharing and doing things together, lack of just carrying out roles and everyday normal things. So that's part of the effect. It could also, the depression could bombard plans, things that we were supposed to be doing together, because one is going through a depression. they're not participating, they're not fully there. That effect has a long-term effect, and it has a ripple effect depending on the temperament of both parties. There are those that may say, I know that my spouse or my significant other is going through depression. And I always say there's healing even beyond a word of prayer. How do I offer them help? How can we get them help? Are they willing to get help? Is there someone trusted that we can really talk to and talk through it? Because that's important. Some people won't go to an official therapist, but they may go to a trusted couple or a trusted counselor inside of that. And what I'm saying, there's nothing professional about listening other than having the ability to listen and listen to understand, not listen just to be able to talk back at them. So can it affect marriage? It can affect the relationship in all the ways that I just named. It can. And oftentimes if a person temperament where I can't deal with it, it's got on my nerve because see, here's short temper. Here's short temper now. I'm going to bring in something that's very important. I didn't say it. This isn't Thicklin. This isn't Thicklin 13. Okay.
We got to do this disclaimer on that one.
Right. This isn't Thicklin 13. This Roman 13. The Bible says love is patient. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stop it right there. Love is patient. That means that, listen, we've got to at least be willing to give this person an opportunity and walk alongside them to help walk them through this depression. Yea, though I walk through the valley. Right. Depression oftentimes has a valley-like experience. And we've got to be willing to walk through it. And guess what? If we're willing to walk through it with them, we're not by ourselves because goodness and mercy is with us as well. But we must be willing. We cannot use that period of time of why our significant other is in depression as our time to bail out. Well, I've been waiting on this moment. Okay, that's my out. No, that shouldn't be your out. that shouldn't be your out. No, that should be your in. Yeah. That should be when you know you got to go all in. Because if you only want somebody when they're in their best, when they're good, then I say to you, what you had wasn't love in the first place.
So that means if they're not in and they're not really engaged. Other words, they don't realize that depression is at the core of their relationship problems. Is it possible? Are those that are dealing with depression in a marriage, are they more likely? Are they more likely to get divorced? Because I just feel, if you don't realize the depression in the core of that relationship, is that possible to is that more likely for those folks, those that married, that's dealing with depression in marriage, more likely to get divorced?
Well, I've not read any research that definitively say that. And the reason I say that is this: people get divorced for a lot of reasons. And a lot of the reason they get divorced is not what they put on that piece of paper. We've got this word now that we say irreconcilable difference, right? Irreconcilable difference. And that's a broad phrase. But underneath there could be depression. It could be what I call buyer's remorse. It wasn't what I thought it was, and I want out. People don't just generally go and get divorced because someone is depressed. There are other things that are happening. There are other things that are now manifesting themselves that a person may determine this is my breaking point or this is my out inside of it. I do honestly believe that when people are going through depression, that if the parties if there's love and they have that foundation there, their first thing is not to, that's over with because I can't deal with you. You always depressed. You're no fun. You're this, that, and other. The real thing is, baby, how we get help. Right. What are those things? Sometimes we would try to revisit things that we used to do that was fun, that brought joy, that brought that. So it's not a quick exit is what I'm saying. Very seldom you see that being the core reason why a person gets divorced.
Hey guys, once again, this is the South Florida Live Podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Brown, with my special guest, Dr. J.R. Thicklin. And hey man, thank you again for being with us and bringing us and just enlightening us and just uplifting us and answering. This is the thing that I love. You're giving answers, and people are receiving the answers. And that's what
we have some awesome people that is on. And Tamara said, you're right. There's a root. Depression is an effect of the root cause. And you're exactly right. And that's one of the reasons that we said that it's not over with. It doesn't happen simply because of depression. There's something else that is at the root of it. Absolutely.
Hey, listen, y'all, it's been great. It's been fun, but we got to go. Hey, thank you, Doc, for joining us. Hey, thank you those that's been watching. Listen, if you like to support the podcast, here it is. You can Zelle us at South Florida Live Show at gmail.com, and also Cash App $ Power of Glory 777. You can help us. You can support this podcast. If you were blessed by it, if you were uplifted, you got the answers that you were searching for. Bless us, support us. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for joining us on this evening. Once again, thank you for Dr. J.R. Thickley joining us on this evening. Hey, I always say this. Listen, I'll pray for you and you pray for me. Listen, y'all, let's watch God change things.
Email your idea for show topics to the South Florida Live Show at gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in to South Florida Live with your host, Jeffrey Brown.